All right, we're going to do a different style of video for the channel this week because the content that I want to share in this video is going to be more hands-on. So we're going to be talking about how to analyze any piece of fiction in just 4 steps. My name is Michael Aran, and welcome to Author Level Up, where we do videos every week to help you write better and faster. And I do these videos because I believe that each of you has an inner Stephen King and you just need help unlocking it. So if you're new here, consider subscribing and click that little bell, ding, 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 to get notifications every time I have a writing video. And you can go to my website at authorlevelup.com to see all the things that I have to offer. First off, I have a book, and it's called Mental Models for Writers, 73 Ways to Elevate Your Thinking, Improve Your Writing, and Capture Success. And in that book, I talk about Plato. Now, why would I talk about Plato? Well, Plato has a theory that it was really interesting that you can really think about in terms of writing. Sum it up very quickly for you. Essentially, Plato believed that we came from a perfect world, and our entire life is a pursuit of trying to replicate that world. So if we apply that to writers, we are simply trying to tell stories that we see in our mind's eye as they exist in the prior world. So Plato's world of forms is really interesting. When you think about writing techniques, is there such a thing as a perfect writing technique? And might it look a little bit something like this? So we're talking about the pursuit of imperfection here. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got a perfect technique that exists off in the world of the forms, the perfect world we talked about, right? And we've got authors on the right-hand side who are creating replicas of that. They are trying to see into the world of the forms, and they're trying to replicate what they see, but it's never perfect, right? Because life is a pursuit of imperfection. So we could say that authors all over the world will attempt to replicate this form in their own writing, but each author will have a different line of sight into the form and will execute on it differently. This explains why we're all different. Now, what if we change these replicas to actual people, right? So what if Stephen King and J.K. Rowling and you were all trying to implement the same writing technique? And what if the lines that were connecting the circles represented the author's line of sight into the world of forms? So what if we said that the difference between an amateur and a bestseller is that a bestseller had a clearer line of sight into the world of the forms? Well, if that were true, then every amateur's goal would be to sharpen their vision and learn how to see into the world of forms more clearly. And to do this, you would study writers that have a clearer line of sight than you do to see what you can learn to sharpen your own vision. All right, so the question then becomes, well, how do you do that? How do you sharpen your vision? How do you see into this world of forms to create better writing techniques? And the way that I believe, and this is something I learned from law school, we need to develop what we call laser vision. So all my attorneys watching can attest to what I'm about to say because I'm going to trigger you and take you back to law school. And when attorneys go to law school and they are studying for exams and they're reading cases, many of them learn what we call the IRAC method. IRAC stands for Issue, Relevant Law, Analysis, and Conclusion. And if you study the IRAC method, this is how the tests in law school, for the most part, are going to be structured. So if you can answer a question in the IRAC method, you can basically ace the question. So the IRAC method helps you explain a case succinctly, spot the issues, and make sound arguments. It's how lawyers learn how to synthesize a body of cases into clear thought. And so while I was learning this method, I thought to myself, if we're studying fiction, you can do the same thing. It's no different, right? We read lots of books, but we struggle to synthesize them together into something meaningful to improve our craft. So what if we could find a way to synthesize everything? Would be interesting, wouldn't it? So this is an example of a law school case, and I apologize for the small text here, but you don't really need to know the facts. I'm just giving you an example of how this works. So there was a copyright case that I studied when I took copyright law, and the issue in this case was what level of contribution is required to qualify as a co-author. And this dealt with a section of the copyright law where it talked about the authors of a joint work and how they are co-owners of a copyright in the work. All right, so that's all you really need to know. And in this particular case, the plaintiff was a founding member of the defendant's theater company. And the plaintiff prepared 3 plays for the theater. And after a dispute, the defendant stopped paying royalties to the plaintiff, who was, I believe, a director at the theater. And the defendant asserted that it was a co-author in the plays that the director created because the theater and its actors made various suggestions to the director during the development of the plays, which I assume were incorporated into the final work. And so the court looked at what is called the Goldstein test, and it says essentially that each contribution from the defendant can be copyrightable, but each author must apply more than mere ideas. And so the big idea, the big conclusion that we derive from that case after looking at all of this was that because the defendant could not identify any specific copyrightable contributions made by its actors, it did not qualify as a joint actor, and so therefore the Playhouse could not claim copyright ownership in the work. So I hope you see how all that works together. You start with an issue, you then move into the law that is relevant, and then you analyze what the court has to say, and then you come up with a rule or conclusion from that case that helps guide you when you're looking at other cases that may be similar or may be different. All right, so that is how the IRAC method works. Again, I'm not going to go too deeply into this because many of you I know are not lawyers, so there's no point. And I have oversimplified this to make a point. Here's a radical idea. The art of learning fiction involves asking good questions. So instead of reading another book and just trying to figure out how an author did it, instead, the art of fiction is learning how to ask good questions. So if we want to follow the techniques that I'm going to give you here, we have to start thinking in terms of questions rather than in terms of techniques. Can we do the IRAC method for fiction? I believe we can. So how do we tweak this methodology to our purposes? Well, first things first, we have an issue. What is the specific craft issue at hand? We also have what I like to call relevant books. In what books have you seen this technique used? And then we have application instead of analysis. How did authors that you read observe, or authors that you read apply this technique? And then lastly, we have conclusions. What can I learn about this or applying this in my own work? So our focus here is to look at a passage of fiction, figure out how the author did it, and then take away a guideline or a rule of thumb that we can easily apply in our own work. We have an example here, and this is an example that I have been fascinated with for the past few years, and I'm fascinated with it, and I'll tell you why. My example is head hopping. So head hopping is kind of funny, right? So the issue here is how can you head hop in the same chapter without losing readers? Now, as I said before, head hopping is kind of funny, right? Readers hate it. Just you say the very word head hopping and people start foaming at the mouth. Readers don't like it. So therefore, it's something that we should avoid, right? Right? But here's the thing. I've studied a lot of mega best-selling authors, and I've noticed that they do it all the time. In fact, I see it very often. I've seen mega best-selling authors do exactly what the common wisdom says not to do. So therefore, I have a question. How? And better yet, why? How can we head hop at the level of a mega bestseller so that we can break that rule and intrigue readers? That is the question that we want to ask. The issue at hand, and we're going to go through this here. The issue at hand is, how do you head hop in the same chapter without losing readers? Now again, remember, we have an issue here. Readers apparently don't like head hopping. Writers say not to do head hopping, but I've seen mega bestsellers do it. So the question that I'm going to ask is, how do you head hop in the same chapter without losing readers? That is our issue. Now, we've got some relevant books, and I chose these books because these are books where I have seen these mega bestsellers do it. So I'm just going to pick a couple here. Vision in White by Nora Roberts, The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton, and Eye of the Needle by Ken Follett. Hopefully some of you have read these. I don't expect you to have read all of them, and by no means do you have to have read all of them to understand what we're going to talk about next. So let's talk about Nora Roberts. I've seen Nora Roberts do this. She head hops with the best of them, and we have an application in the romance genre here. So in the section in this book, Vision in White, where she does it is in a meet cute through the eyes of both the hero and the heroine. A meet cute is when the hero and heroine meet for the first time, and it's supposed to be kind of cute, all right? So I've seen her do that, and in this scene, here's what happens. The heroine accidentally hits the hero in the head with a door, okay? So she hits him in the head with a door, and it's told through the perspective of the heroine first, and we get a few sentences of the heroine reacting to the event, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And then we have a turn of thought, and then we have a switch to the hero, and basically he is observing what is going on while he's got like stars spinning in his head. And so he's seeing the heroine and making his own opinions about her. And then in the previous section, she saw him and made her own opinions about him. And in a very quick succession, you have both characters who have an opinion of each other. Okay? And then the turn of thought here is very subtle. Like how she does it, you don't even notice it. It's just kind of like she floats from one POV to the next. Now, I've probably used a word that we need to define, and that is turn of thought. Michael, what is a turn of thought? Well, let's take a time out. A turn of thought is a subtle shift in narrative, such as a transition from a character's thoughts to action. So let me give you an example. Two characters sitting in a restaurant, and they're talking when the waitress interrupts them. The sentence just before the waitress enters is the turn of thought. Now, if you still need another example, let's visualize it. Okay, so I just drew this. Don't make fun of my artwork here. So we have a chapter. This is a printed page of a book. We have a chapter, and we've got words here that are the black lines, and then we've got a turn of thought that divides them in the middle. Those are the red lines. The red lines are a character coming to a conclusion, and then something happens. Okay, so a turn of thought is almost like a seam that separates sections within the same chapter to each other. You don't really notice them, but once you start to see them, you can never unsee them. And I've done a video on this, and it goes into great detail on this. So if you still need some help on this, check it out in the YouTube card above my head or in the video description, all right, or YouTube card above at the top of the video, all right? So that's a turn of thought, okay? So let's go back to this. We have a meet cute through the eyes of both the hero and the heroine. Heroine accidentally hits the hero in the head with a door. A few seconds of her reacting to the event, realizing how cute maybe this guy is. And then we have a very subtle shift to his perspective, realizing how beautiful she is. And voila, we're in love. Okay? And this is done through a very subtle turn of thought that links the two POVs together. All right, so let's talk about Ken Follett, Eye of the Needle. This is a great historical thriller if you haven't read it. And essentially it is about the British and the Germans trying to outsmart each other during World War II. And it follows a villain for a very long part of the novel. The villain is very prominent. And when we meet him for the first time, he is just this unassuming spy who is posing as a day laborer who's staying in, I think, like a cottage or an apartment building. And in this scene, leading up to it, there's a landlady, and she thinks he is the bee's knees. She has a crush on him, and she has a sexual crush on him, and she wants to talk to him, and maybe they can get together. All right. So this scene is our introduction to the villain, because up until this point, this guy is just some unassuming guy. We don't know who he really is, and we're just about to find out that he is not who we think he is, and that he is a badass. All right. So the scene opens in the point of view of the landlady. Okay? It is the landlady that we open the scene in, and she's got a crush on this guy and she wants to make a move on him. And the problem is that she wants to make a move on him while he is transmitting a secret message to the Germans. All right, so basically it goes to the point where she puts the key in the door and opens the door. We get a turn of thought, and then we get a crisp section break. All right, so we get a hard break. So hard break, and then when we come back, the next section is told in the point of view of the villain as he charms the landlady before killing her. So he kind of plays along with her, seduces her, and then he kills her. And then the story resumes through his perspective as he covers up the murder, cleans up, and then flees. So the interesting thing about this one is we said Nora Roberts, she separated her point of views when she head hopped with a very subtle turn of thought. Here, Ken Follett separates his point of views with a crisp section break. That's kind of interesting. That's almost exact opposite, isn't it? So maybe we need another application to see how someone else does it. So let's talk about Michael Crichton, The Andromeda Strain. Very good novel, a very fast-paced thriller novel about a pandemic, some weird alien disease that is ravaging the world's population. All right. As I record this, we're dealing with the coronavirus stuff, and so that's pretty relevant. All right. So in this scene, we have head hopping in a race against time to save the world, with two main characters working together. Character A is climbing in a chamber, racing toward a reactor, I believe. It is a very active. He's a very active character, and he's told in a very active way. Character B is in a control room talking to Character A, directing him where to go and what to do. This character is very passive, treated in a very passive way, and I think the reason Crichton did that was to focus on Character A and then have Character B be kind of a supporting role. And this way, you don't have two characters that are stepping on their toes. All right, so this works fairly well. But the interesting thing about this section is that the pacing is so fast that when I read this for the first time, I completely missed the POV shifts. In fact, Crichton did this so well, I didn't even realize he had done it until afterward. And I'm like, wait a minute. How did whoa, hold on a second. And then my head kind of exploded. So we have pacing here that's kind of interesting. So I look at all three of these, and I can draw a few conclusions based on what I've seen Roberts, Crichton, and Follett do. So, my conclusions here. Head hopping is best accomplished when the reader is distracted from its existence through another writing technique. So, for example, when we talked about Eye of the Needle by Follett, he is introducing a villain and he has a plot device. We're using that as a plot device, right? With Crichton, the pacing is so fast that you just miss it. So the next conclusion is head hopping can be accomplished more easily in fast-paced scenes because the pacing masks the effect of the point of view switches. Kind of an interesting thing to think about. And then characters working as a team together is a great way to facilitate point of view shifts, especially if the reader is rooting for them to accomplish a task. Okay, we learned that with Michael Crichton. And then also we learned this from Follett that a plot reveal can also be used to mask point of view shifts in lieu of pacing. So that's kind of interesting as well. And then we can also say that head hopping can be done within the same page using turns of thought or through section breaks. We saw it both ways, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. So if we were going to synthesize all of this information together into one takeaway, one thought that we can apply to our own writing if we wanted to head hop, it would be this. Head hopping is best used as a tactic to help you accomplish another writing technique. It should never draw attention to itself, but if it does, the reader still shouldn't be bothered by it. All right? Now, as you find more examples of head hopping as you read more and more books, you can return to these conclusions and you can update them. It's kind of like science, right? You go off and you read something or you discover something new, and then you come back and you update what you already know. Maybe there are other exceptions that you can find, or maybe there are other use cases of head hopping that you can find that you can implement in your own work. That is the beauty of this. Now, let me put this another way. I don't like mustard. And I never eat mustard on anything. But if a chef cooks food in mustard and I don't ever see it and I don't ever smell it, well, then I love it. I know it's kind of a weird thing, but I cannot stand mustard. But people cook things in mustard all the time, and I probably don't even know it. So I like to think of head hopping as more of a catalyst than it is a front and center writing technique. You want to be thinking about this as a sleight of hand. You want to be, it's almost like a smoke and mirrors kind of thing, right? That is the best way to think about it. And so if we were to use that in our own work, that's how we would approach it. All right. So let's put this back together again. IRAC method for fiction. What is the specific craft issue at hand? In what books have you seen this technique used? And how did authors apply the technique? And what can you learn about applying this in your own work? If you do this for every writing technique that you see that moves you, you don't have to do it for all of them, but just do it for a couple of them in the books that you read that you enjoy. Wow, you're going to really take your craft to the next level. So let's put this all together, all right? So aim for 5 to 10 minutes when you're studying a new technique. This does not have to be a long process. You want it to be quick because your time is best spent writing, but you also need to be able to analyze information quickly when you're looking at something to figure out how it worked so that you can use that in your own techniques and you can use that to develop your craft. Okay, so this technique is also most effective, I think, if you use it on a single subgenre. So if you read all the books in your subgenre and you started doing this and started putting IRAC methods for certain things that you see, that's going to be very, very effective. But don't be afraid to read broadly like I have with this example, and feel free to use any technique you find. That's how you start to develop a style. Now, when you read, please learn how to reverse engineer writing craft techniques that you see into questions. Remember, don't focus on techniques. Turn techniques into questions. That's how you can learn how to issue spot, because the issue is your jumping off point. If you can turn everything you see into an issue, you're going to win. So I have some examples here. What is the best way to open a novel where the character has a pessimistic view of the city? And then also, how can I kill off a supporting hero? And so then all the books you read where you potentially see this issue, they add color to your conclusions. Now, if you study enough books in your subgenre, you can start to tease out relevant practical rules that can guide you as you learn the craft. All right? And a body of rules can serve as a precedent for a particular subgenre. So just as case law can serve, a body of case law can serve as precedent for a given case at hand, we can also do this with our writing. So guys, if you like this, I've got an entire book on strategies that are just like this that I think are going to be right up your alley. It's called the Writing Craft Playbook, 20 fiction and nonfiction tricks to keep your readers in the zone. And here's the kicker. This book is completely free. All you have to do is sign up for my email fan club in order to get it. It is a full-length book, and I think that you're going to really enjoy it. It's got lots of visuals, lots of hands-on examples to help you think about the craft of writing in a different way so that you can write better books faster. So you can get your copy at authorlevelup.com/fan club. That's authorlevelup.com/fan club. And I want to end this with a thank you. I appreciate you watching. If this is your first time watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I will talk to you in the next video. Take care.
Perfect.